Okay, so we're going to hit and yes, I wanted to keep going with nosy things, nosy things. Um, I wanted to keep going with the space in the neck and the shoulders that is available to us. I think that's really important. Something that we've been looking at. We were looking at that a bit, last week as well. Just this spaciousness to the ribs, and spaciousness to the thoracic. So just making sure that you've got lots of space around you. Just realizing I haven't got an awful lot of space behind me, but making sure you've got lots of space around you, for arms and that sort of stuff. And just, I think just as you're laying on your back, there's an interesting thing about the discs of the spine is that the intervertebral disc, or the fibrous part in between the bone parts. So you know, we've talked about this before. We've talked about vertebral discs, which are your bony processes, and then you've got your fibrous discs in between. We like to call them discs, don't we? So we've got these fibrous discs in between, and what's quite interesting is that the height of the fibrous disc at the lumbars is very different to the height of the disc at the thoracic. So whilst in the low spine, we've got sort of this much more squashy disc area, when we get to the thoracic, the discs there are actually quite slim, and they're very slim compared to the lower lumbars. So creating space for in the lumbars is very much sort of for hydration of the intervertebral discs, of these sort of fibrous, pulpy, a bit like wood pulp really, this sort of fibrous pulpy disc in between the low spine discs, low spine bone discs. So when we're creating space, when we're tilting the pelvis there, and we sort of, you know, start to pull the spine and make gaps, you know, we can do this gapping between each intervertebral space. So when we tilt the pelvis, it does that. When we drop the tummy back towards the spine, it does that, and it starts to mobilize the slide and glide of the tissues around the spine, but it also moves the bone discs around, which starts to create slide and glide in the fibrous part of the discs, and they're quite dense, so it's not a sloppy affair. But as we start to move through there and cause that gapping, as we get up into the ribs, it's a little bit more difficult. And that's because the bone discs are a bit more close coupled, they're a bit closer together. So when we get into the spine and we start connecting the arms, if we have the arms over the chest and the long arm bones coming back through the sockets, and we start to let the shoulder blades come back to the ground, we feel that as we start to breathe into the lower parts of the ribs, so if we go into the V shape at the front of the ribs, and when we let the breath come out, the front of the ribs can sink into the back of the ribs, and again we get this broadness. We're actually looking to make space into tissues that are just a little bit more dense. So there's lots of connections. There's ribby connections, because the ribs aren't bony extensions of the vertebrae. They're actually they have a facet joint, so they've got, you know, fibrous connections to the spine, all of which is mobile. and has some degree of movement. Of course it does, because we need to breathe. So whilst the ribs are quite tightly bound onto the vertebral processes, there is an allowance for movement there. So as we start to drop the arms through the sockets and we start to sink the chest back, we can start to feel this spreading up and down that starts to happen up towards the back of the head and down towards the pelvis. And in conjunction with that movement going vertically towards the head and descending down towards the pelvis, the breath also brings in this broadness dynamic. And as the lungs expand, and there's a contraction, of course, to the intercostals, which pulls the ribs open, we can feel that there's this sort of broadening and softening in all directions across the back of the ribs. And sticky ribs and ribs that, or the muscles laying over the top of the ribs when they're being a bit ineffectual, means that there's more movement in the lumbars, sometimes more than there should be, and that can start to interfere with those nice sort of pulpousy discs in the lumbars. Things start to get compressed and things start to get pulled around more than they should be, because the lumbars have got more freedom to move than the thoracic ever will. Kind of the same with the neck spine, although their spinous processes tend to prevent them from shifting around too much. We get disc bulges at the neck, but the vertebrae don't tend to shift around like they do in the lumbars. So we use the weight of the head, drawing that line from the nose back into the back of the head, which just allows the face just to sort of soften in on itself a little bit. We can let the eyes soften in and the tongue can soften. And the more we drop into this space, the more space we get in the throat and the underside of the skull and the long neck. So if we just interlace the fingers, or you can hold with that thumb hold that we use sometimes, and just let like somebody's got hold of your fingers, purling them up towards the end of your mat. It's like they're trying to pull your arms out of your sockets, but you're going to breathe out and pull the ribs back down to the ground, which draws the arms back and down towards their sockets and into the sides of the ribs. So the deepest stretch that we start to feel is this sort of connection where the shoulder blade is on the back of the ribs. And if you're not sure where that is, you can just take your hand round the side into the underarm, that underarm area, and just locate the shoulder blade, which has moved down quite considerably, but also moved out a little bit as well. So you should be able to touch it. And if you just follow the line of the underside of the shoulder blade there, and just follow that down, take you down into the side of the ribs, and we can just feel that letting the hand rest on the side of the ribs there helps the arm get drawn back into its socket a little bit more. And this creates space at the top of the shoulder and the side of the neck. So when the arm that's up above you comes back to center, just noticing how the shoulder feels. And we can try that on the other side. So we're just going to interlace the fingers and take the arms up, or have that nice hand hold. It's more of a guiding hand hold. And then we can just use if you're on the right side, we can just use the left hand around the underarm area into the shoulder blade, and then that takes you down into the side of the ribs there. And just noticing if there's any areas of tension. So it might be in the front, in the pec major, or it might be down the side of the ribs, so you might feel it very strongly in the underarm, or maybe at the top of the shoulder, making sure that we've got this lovely heavy thumb that's pulling away towards the top of the mat, and the index finger as well. We don't want to be scrunchy up at the shoulders. We want all this work to be coming from the centre of the chest. So when we bring the arms back over, again, maybe we feel that there's more of a broadness to the chest, and the collarbones can be just a little bit broader. So we're just going to bring the right knee in towards you, and just letting the long leg bone, letting the long leg bone just find its way down into the hip. Let the pelvis just roll away a little bit. As the knee comes in, it has the tendency to tip the hips, but we want to let the hips roll in the other direction. Nice and heavy through the sit bones. And just feeling space at the front of the hip. Just letting the ankle just float to the other side of the knee. And just finding that softening in the ball and socket joint. Let the knee go away towards the bottom end of your mat. And we just leave the left foot on the floor for a moment. And just seeing if we can create space in the front of the hip joint, so that we can just take the heel and let the heel be drawn up towards the sky. So the heel comes away from the ankle. It's an interesting one. We've done all these movements before, but we let the knee float in, and that's through one plane of motion. But then we want that nice rotation in the ball and socket joint, which takes the ankle to the outside of the left knee. And we can work into that internal and external rotation. As the knee comes in towards you, if we work through that, if we were bringing like the knee, if we imagine there was a clock face on our tummy and our knee is out at 9 o'clock, we could swing the knee in towards 12 o'clock, and that would be looking at our internal and external rotation. How steady can we keep the hips when we're working through that? And then we can release the side of the ankle from the top of the knee and let the heel just be drawn up towards the sky. And we've got space in the hip socket to do that. And the tummy muscles get quite heavily involved. Can we broaden the foot and soften the foot? You know, we want space in between the toes. And keep working with the space between the heel and the balls of the feet. So can we lengthen through there and broaden the foot? And this all changes the tissues of the hip, which is a lovely thing. So when we bring the ankle back down to the knee, we've come into that side to side movement with, not sure if it is a side to side movement, where we're taking our knee from the 3 o'clock to the 12 o'clock, so into the midline and then out laterally to the hip. Have we got more space in the hip? So we'll bring the right foot down, And let the left knee float in towards us, and just noticing the difference between the two hips. Again, just let that knee come in towards you. Sit bones drop down. So we're just tilting the hips a little bit so that we've got that just micromillimeters of space between your low back and the floor. And then we can just start to think about taking the ankle to the outside of the knee. And it may be that the tissues are different. So we just work with whatever we've got, just letting the knee float out. Can we keep the hips steady? So the movement is coming from the ball and socket joint. And we can just move the knee between that 12 o'clock and 3 o'clock position. And then once we've created a little bit of space there, just testing, taking the heel up towards the sky. Bring the ankle back down and do the same in and out movement. And trying not to be in here with any expectation. If it feels different than the other side, it just does. There's nothing to do about that. You know, there is a why in there somewhere. Why do those particular muscles overwork? But the answer won't be in the hip, it'll be somewhere else. So it's kind of a moot point to try and balance the sides out. We just work with what we've got. And each time the foot comes up towards the sky, we really feel that we're pulled by the heel, so that we can start to either relax and release on the front of the quads, or maybe get a bit of a stretch into the hamstrings at the back. Feet come back down. I'm just going to take the elbows out to the side, and then just giving the feet a nice rub either on the carpet that's underneath you or the sticky mat. So good just to give the feet a little bit of a rub. It wakes the soles of the feet up. Wakes the soles of the feet up. And then we can just let the feet get pulled down into the ground. And just feeling that the legs can just drop back into the hips, and the hips drop back into the ground. You know, it's a real letting our body relaxing gravity. You know, we can move without effort when we just let our bodies just let gravity do the work, basically. So just noticing as you're going from side to side what the sides of the waist feel like. Can we create space between the ribs? It's nice to have a hand on the ribs. To just encourage them in the opposite direction to the twist, then you can. When we press on this front sort of pointy part of the ribs, what we should feel is a broadness that happens up into the shoulders. And that broadness up into the shoulders and that broadness that happens underneath the shoulder blades then helps us to get more space into the low spine. Low spine doesn't actually rotate that much. All the rotation is coming from the lower thoracic and the very upper lumbars. So we want to keep that movement there. We don't really want rotationally things happening lower down in the spine and towards the base of the pelvis. So we keep dropping the legs back into the sockets. Very easy to get guided by the knees. To center. Just going to give the knees a nice hug. Have a little rock from side to side. And we're going to come over onto whichever side is comfortable and come up into our square pose. So we find our feet. And again, when we come into the hands, so make sure you've got enough padding for your hands. If you need something under the wrist, something under the hands, do that. Make sure there's enough, particularly if you've got parts of the hands that aren't so keen on being on the floor. We want to give them a break. So get something nice and squashy underneath them, it's useful. So we're looking at this, bringing the interface into the ground. So we'll draw the nose back towards the back of the head, which, just like when we were on the ground, when we bring the nose back into the back of the head, it lengthens out the neck spine, picks up the nice ligament in front of that lays in front of the spine and starts to lengthen all the spine out, because it will travel all the way down to the pelvis. So just by that one act of bringing the nose into the back of the head, we've started a chain reaction that's going to go all the way down. So we just start to find, can we find a bit of a nod with the head, which will give us some space at the base of the skull. And that will take us through the neck spine. So we just keep lengthening away with the crown of the head. And it's almost like this, this nodding effect almost has like a ratcheting effect on the spine. Well, it's not that strong, but as the nose and the jaw come into the back of the head, they start to give space to the neck spine, and that's useful. And can we stay up in that space? Avoid the urge to come down into the ribs and into the low spine. But just stay and work on this small but really important part of our spines. So when we bring the nose into the back of the head and bring the head back up to neutral, we're just going to take one ear and feel like somebody's got hold of our ear and they're taking it forwards towards the wall in front of you. And it's not it's not a heavy movement or a strong movement. It's just letting the ear drift forwards. Try not to let the face look up if you can, keeping the head dead level.
And it's just this nice stretch on the side of the neck. And we can come back to the center and let the other ear. Now, if you have been working very hard looking at a screen a lot, and I have, this might not be very comfortable. So keep drawing the jaw and the nose into the back of the head. Equally, if you've been out in the garden and you've been lifting super heavy things and you know that your head has been a bit forward, again, you might find some muscles in here that are not particularly pleased with what we're doing. But just one side and the other, feeling that that ear can get drawn forwards. And coming back to the center, we're just going to take the sit bones back into our lovely child pose. Just let the hands be free for a moment. And we're just going to let the crown of the head get pulled forwards towards the wall in front of you and then pulled down towards the ground. So the elbows engage into the ground, the sides of the hands engage into the ground. That gives you stability through the shoulders. And again, we're just letting the weight of the head create space either side of these channels of muscle that lay up either side of the spine. And this will take you a little bit more into the chest than before. But when you're uncurling and bringing the head back to neutral, we want to feel that we're uncurling from between the shoulder blades out through the long neck spine into the back of the head, and then we can repeat the movement. So it's the nose that comes into the back of the head, the jaw that comes into the back of the head, the top of the head falls down towards the ground. And we can just create a little bit more space there. If it's nice to bring the thumbs in underneath the occipital ridge, which we've been doing previously, then great. If it's too strong, don't worry about it. And remember that the unfurling is as important as the curling in. We get very enamored with the curling in because that's where we can feel the big stretch, and then we forget to do the other work in the other direction. We want that. And notice if the ribs start to dig into the thighs as the head goes forwards. We want to pull the ribs back towards the spine, and then that gives us more space up in the collarbones, more space up in the neck. This is good. So we're going to come forwards onto our tummies. And we're just finding the top of the feet front of the ankles. Let the backs of the knees just turn into puddles of chocolate. But we want the knees to be quite heavy. So yes, we want the back of the knee to be quite fluid, to be quite soft. If we gave the heels a woggle, which shook the knees, can we feel that there's like custard in there that's wobbling about? It's kind of that's the the spaciousness that we're looking for, knees get leant on a little bit too heavily, and then they start to lose the space in them. So we recreate space by the weight of the feet, the front of the ankle being pulled open, which then starts to create this spaciousness in the knee. The shin goes down towards the end of your mat, and the thighs go up towards the pelvis, because that's what they're supposed to do. Front of the hips start to get pulled open and look down into the center of the earth. You remember those headlights that we have on the front of the hips there. This is a practice all of its own. Just laying on the floor is a practice all of its own, because we're just not used to doing it. It doesn't matter really what arrangement we are in with regards to the earth, whether we're laying on it, sitting on it, or standing on it. We've got this tendency to try and push it away, and that creates tensions in the body, and it pulls the joints together. So can we let ourselves in this laying arrangement just be completely supported by the floor? Can we feel that the floor pushes back up into the tops of the feet? Can we feel that the floor pushes back up into the front of the thighs? And when we really start to get our heads around this, and it becomes experiential for us, then we find that we can truly relax, because relaxation is where we can actually relax completely and just let the tensional networks of the body do their job. Most of the time we're in assist mode, where we think we have to create tensions in the body and move the body around for it. But actually it's far more intelligent than that. It does not need our intervention. So we spend time in the process of letting that go. So we start to notice now one leg heavier than the other, one hip presenting to the floor more than the other, with the old discrepancies start to show themselves. One foot connects with the floor easily, the other one doesn't. One foot is long, the other one isn't, that sort of stuff. So just taking that inventory, moving through the body. And at some point we'll start getting up into the low spine and the front of the ribs. And the ribs have to arrange themselves on the ground. A little bit like the hips, in finding their space, stuff on the back starts to move. So when the pelvis starts to present to the ground properly, we find that the sacrum is invited into the low spine. And something starts to happen in the low spine, something starts to happen in the pelvis starts to tilt. And for those of us that spend our time with the pelvis tucked under, it might feel a little odd to feel that the tail comes up a little bit. So we keep going through, because as the sacrum gets invited into the low spine, that gives space, which is then translated up into the rib spine. So as the front of the ribs move back and the back of the ribs start to lengthen up towards the head, the elbows get involved. So we pull the elbows down into the ground. We can do this quite strongly. And that again starts to get us into that axillary process, the underarm, side of the ribs, where we tend to be a little bit stiff and a little bit sticky. But there's a good weight to the base of the back of the ribs, which gives us length, keeps giving us length. Takes time because the tissues are really dense here. So can we keep pulling down through the elbows? Can we keep feeding the arms back through the shoulders? Can we keep getting broadness into the rib spine? When we really get into the broadness of the rib spine, the shoulders start to drop away. It is a process. It's an important process, because when we start to move and make moves from the base of the ribs, the top of the obliques, and that sort of core control, the shoulders can actually really relax and let go. So tight and stiff shoulders are a thing this is the practice for you. And of course, we've always got the nose coming back into the head, messing around with that. So we're going to take the right arm down the side of the body. And then we're just going to bring the arm out to the side and up. And just notice how that feels in the shoulder blade. We can bring the arm down, the hand goes underneath the shoulder. And we pull the elbow down towards the heel, which takes the shoulder away from the side of the neck and down. And then we'll put that elbow back and we take the other arm down to the side of the body. And then out and round and up. This is where we need a bit more space. And then just like we're swimming, we're going to pull that arm, that hand back underneath the shoulder. Elbow goes down towards the heel, pulls the shoulder away from the ear. And we'll come back up. So we do that once more. Arm goes out, round and down to the side of the thigh. Up and round, back to centre. And then if you don't have to put the hand back on the floor, you can leave it. Hand comes down underneath the shoulder. Elbow gets pulled down. We really use the heel of the hand into the ground as a lever to pull that elbow down towards the ear. Nice space at the side of the neck, top of the shoulder. And we can come back to the centre, other side, arm comes out, round and down. And then up, back to centre, and then hand comes underneath the shoulder. Elbow comes down, really using that heel of the hand as a lever. And then coming back to the centre, still got our elbows into the ground. So this time I'm going to pull down through the feet, pull down through the hips, and then into the front of the ribs. Now it's quite a strong movement, so see how you go. What we don't want is the movement to move into the low back, so your hips don't move. And your front of your ribs, they don't really move. There is going to be movement because we're going to barrel roll the chest to the side. But both hips, both feet, always feeling equal on the ground right the way through. So what we're going to do is going to pull down through the, let's do this properly, pull down through the left hip and the left foot. I'm going to draw the left hand back to underneath the shoulder. And then we're just going to lift with the elbow. It's a little bit like swimming. Bringing the hand forwards as far as it will go. And then coming back in. And you can keep going on one side and then the other, but we don't usually do that. So we let the arm sink. I'm going to pull down through the right hip and right foot so that the right arm becomes free. And then it can move. So the movement happens through the ribs. There's a nice stretch into, that's the wrong side, nice stretch into the obliques here, but not much happening in the low spine. That makes sense. So it's a little bit like doing front crawl on your, swimming on your thing. If anybody ever learnt like this. I don't think I did. I think I just got chucked in the pool. We didn't get to do swimming on the side. But what we want to do, and this is good if you do swimming, we want the movement to come through, the rotation to come through that base of the ribs, top of the lumbars. You know, for a lot of us, we do too much rotation in the lower lumbars because there's not enough movement in the thoracics. And if it's too strong, you can just bring the hand in underneath the shoulder Let the hand be drawn down into the ground so it gives you a little bit of a twizzle. Let the bottom half of your body go super loose. And we just have a little stretch through that side, and then we can put it back down. And then again on the other side, we're pulling down through the hips to give us that nice rotation. And all the while, just to give you one more thing to do, we're very interested in the nose coming into the back of the head. And you've probably just gone old rat like most like most of us in this movement. We completely forget about our head, and then there's lots of tension and stuff that starts to happen in there. So we keep the nose going into the back of the head. Keep that lovely length into the neck spine. And then we can work with our rolling movement. And one side might be easier than the other. And we're just working through. Notice that I've lost my head again. Yeah. Don't know why I'm teaching this one. It's my least favourite. Gets into all the bits we don't want to get into. So the next time we come down, glasses off if you're wearing them, we're going to find the root of the nose and just letting the hands come out. So we want the elbows to be about shoulder height, and then nice right angle up into the hands, feet, front of the hips, front of the ribs. We can walk all the way up through the spine. It's a bit like squeezing the tube of toothpaste from the feet all the way up. The more the feet get pulled down into the ground, the more the hips get pulled down into the ground, the more length we get into the lumbars, the more we get pulled across the ribs into the ground, the more everything comes up and out of the tube of toothpaste. We keep the nose into the back of the head. You know, we don't need to see where we're going, so we just start to just allow the head to be at the top of the spine. And just keep repeating this movement. And you might find at some point that if we've got enough weight coming down through the ribs and thoracic, that something like our cobra starts to appear. The legs and the hips keep us out of the lumbars, because all we're really interested in is this nice movement at the very, very top of the ribs. How much space can we create inwards and upwards on the inside front of the spine is what we're really interested in. And what we can feel sometimes is that as we're working through this part of the spine, we can really feel the deep inner muscles on the front of the spine lower down also get some work as well. So the next time we come back down, just going to take the hands underneath the shoulders Elbows pull down to the heels. We know that already. And that will take us all the way back and through into our lovely child pose. And again, we can take the fingers forwards. And just seeing about finding that space. Which turns us back to our square pose momentarily, but just noticing how the body feels when we're here. Does it feel a little bit different, particularly in the hands? And when you breathe, does it feel a little bit different in the chest and in the upper shoulders? This is good. So we're going to come around to sitting. Just finding our way around. Hair is not behaving today at all. So have something at your back if that feels nice. If it's good to put something just behind the sit bones and under the coccyx, just helps to tilt the pelvis. We want to be finding that place. Have I lost a cushion? I've got no cushions. So when we're sitting back on the pelvis has this tendency to tip under ever so slightly. It's kind of how we are. And what we want to do is just, like I say, behind the coccyx, under the sit bones, and it just changes the orientation of the pelvis just a little bit and helps us to sit up better. We want this lumbar curve. We don't want it to be flat here. And it might feel a little awkward at first. And it's definitely a little bit offensive on the legs if you like to sit crossed legs. So things have to go on the shift to find its way round. So just working into the pelvis, because when we create the base, the spine can grow out of it. And the spine can't grow out of it when we've got this kind of collapsed space. We want to feel that we've got the feet out in front of us. And it really doesn't matter where the feet are, but we always want them to be very active. So we've got this pull at the heels down into the ground. We've got this pull at the sit bones down into the ground that lengthens us up all the way up through the spine. We sort of, we're creating the conditions for something to grow. So we keep finding that heavy, heavy heel, which has got nice circles. And then we've got the backs of the knees, again, no different. They're nice and soft. Because when we've got that kind of custard feel between the top of the shin bones and the thigh bones, we feel like the back of the knee kind of gets pulled apart from itself. We can do that. We use the heel as a lever, which takes the shin away and then sends the femur back up through its socket into the sit bones, and we start to be able to pull down through those sit bones. And it might be challenging at first because it requires quite a lot of interaction of the legs into the pelvis, but also quite significant upward lift from the structures within the pelvis and within the corset of the waist. So all those muscles that support the spine and the spacing between the pelvis and the ribs all needs to start to lengthen and lift. And if we're a little bit weak here, that can feel a bit hard at first. Keep the heels into the ground and keep the toes waving if we've got the grievous, whatever they're called on the front here, hip flexors. Because again, hip flexors only really get involved when the ribs are collapsing into the top of the pelvis. So if we bring the fingers around the side of the waist, all we do is we just let the shoulders drop, let the hands get really heavy so that they press into the ribs quite strongly. So when we breathe in, because the shoulders don't lift, because we're pressing with the hands, when the ribs press into the hands, they're going to lift us out of the waist. It's such a small movement, but it's a micro movement, but it lets the low spine and the pelvis hang down from the underside of the ribs. But we do have to get past the naughty shoulders that want to lift up and do everything first, as they have a tendency to do. So can we just keep going back into... It's quite a significant weight through the hands. And we can just start to feel, maybe if your thumbs come round far enough, you find that there's this quite chunky channel of muscle on the back. It's sort of like squashy, 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 and then there's this line of quite chunky muscle that's your quadratus lumborum. So just noticing how that feels, and if it feels a bit and mine usually does because I'm looking at the computer, just take hold round the ribs, and that's the muscle that we're looking to lengthen out a little bit, or one of the more external ones that we can feel. We do want the front of the ribs to be coming in towards the spine as well, so they're always going back. This is good. And then we're just going to release the ribs. Just going to take the right arm nice and heavy with the hand, so the arm's falling back, and I'll do the other side. Nice and heavy with the hand, so the arm's falling back through the socket. And we can take the arm up towards the sky, and if it's nice to come out round and back behind you, then it's good. And then we can do the other side. It might be a bit clunky and clicky. Pull down through the sit bones, get nice and long through the spine. Oh dear. One side might be easier than the other. We've got one side that's quite happy and the other side that's absolutely terrible. And then we're just going to bring the hands back down onto the thighs and just take some nice shoulder rolls. So let the collarbones stand off the front of the chest. Let the tips of the shoulders come up to the ears, shoulder blades together on the back of the body. There's nice rolling. Have we still got that line from the nose to the back of the head? Such an interesting experiment, this one, because as soon as we lose that line from the nose to the back of the head automatically starts to come forward. So how can we work with that? How can we keep dropping into that. So we're going to bring the feet in just to wherever is comfortable. And we're just going to take the chin to the chest and breathe broad into the back of the ribs. And come back to center. And then we're going to take the left ear to the left shoulder. Remember, keeping the nose into the back of the head. That lovely stretch down the side of the neck and the top of the shoulder. And center. And come out to the other side. Right ear to right shoulder. Center. And then we're just going to take the chin to look over the right shoulder. And center, and then taking the chin to look over the left shoulder. And center. Good. Just taking a moment to check in with yourself. Notice how your body feels. You've worked hard today, lovelies. Go gently with yourselves. Happy bank holiday. Hope you're doing okay. And I think everything's normal next week. I hope so. We've got quite a few bank holidays to navigate coming up, so I will keep you posted. I'm not sure we will do all of them, but we'll see. All right, my lovelies, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Kaz.
Always.
I particularly like the hip stuff. I appreciated that.
Yeah, we're just it's really important. It's really important. I'm just working on some stuff at the moment where it's all sort of bolting together. So yeah. Turns out your head and your hips have a lot to do with each other.
That makes sense.
And you know, it's I think for me the biggest reveal was I always thought that with these kinds of stress loads, you know, we know if the head is forward, then it negatively impacts the body. But actually to the minutest degrees that it affects the rest of the body, and what are we doing to counteract it all the time? Because actually what we've found, or what we're all talking about at the moment in our world, is it's not so much doing the thing, it's what are you doing to undo the thing. There's a distinct lack of, and then we rested. You know, I spent 18 hours in the garden and the next morning I got up and went to work. This is not the way. I'm going to spend 18 hours in the garden and then I'm going to take a day off. And then, you know, it's how do we create these pockets of time to undo what we just did?
I remember you talking about your high heel shoes, you know, when you go and party.
Yes, that's a long time ago.
Oh, darling. And it was basically, you know, yes, I can wear my high heel shoes, but then I, you know, counteract them.
Yeah. Well, the inflammatory headline that came out on a paper was your phone is not giving you forward head issues. They call it a syndrome, but there's a few of us that refuse to use that word because it's just wrong. And actually, phones and screens aren't causing us to have forward head issues when we look at it properly. It's the fact that we do absolutely nothing else in between those activities to put anything back as it was. So then it becomes a habit. And habits are born from repetition. So, you know, under the old yoga banner was, you know, when I was taught to teach, it was for every pose, there must be a counter pose. For every spinal flexion, there had to be a spinal extension. You had to go in the opposite direction. And that was the teachings of the old yogis, was that for every movement you made in one direction, you had to go in the other direction. You know, that always that equal, for every action, there must be an equal and opposite reaction. So that's really where movement seems to be looking at the moment. It's not that we look at screens all the time, although that is very bad. People spend, you know, upwards of 12 hours, which was a bit of a shock. I thought, you know, 4 or 5 hours was pretty bad, but yeah, apparently upwards of 12. The average, I think, is 9 to 10 hours a day now. So what are we doing for 9 to 10 hours of the rest of our 24 hours that is putting our heads back where they should be? And that's the question at the moment. How do we adapt? It's all about adaptability. We can't make the things go away. So how do we adapt ourselves well to a rapidly changed environment that we now find ourselves in? How do we navigate that well? That is the question.
It's got a name. It's called tech neck.
Yeah, well, the official thing for it, and actually it sends one of my tutors stratospheric because he will not have syndromes, but there is forward head syndrome. There is menopause is now a syndrome as well. There's perimenopause syndrome. And he gets very animated about these things because he's like, as soon as you've given it a syndrome, then that is a diagnosis, which then leads people down a train of thought of, well, I'm stuck like it and I can't do anything about it.
I think it's very clever because there's a continuum, isn't there? You know, it's a syndrome, so it's going to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it was really interesting. I was doing clinic obs, and there was a chap there, and he had a quite significant tremble in his hand, a tremor in his hand, but he had very significant forward head, and the tutor said to the student practitioner, you know, you can probably do something about that. And it's so interesting to me because the patient turned around and said, no, I can't, I have Parkinson's. And that was him. He was dead straight on. He was like, I have Parkinson's, this is the tremor, that's it.
Yeah.
So of course, at that point, in comes tutor, he's like, right, hold my beer and watch this. So they just do these really, and it was nothing magic. I keep waiting for the magic thing, and nothing magic is happening over on this side. There's no magic, you know, magic thing that's happening. And all they did was just did some really gentle soft tissue work. The guy was laying on his back. If you've been on my couch recently, you will have experienced this, where we just, you know, and we've done it together, just thumbs underneath the base of the skull, and just soften the tissues there, and the head naturally gravitates back into its line. And his tremor was significantly reduced by the time that he left. So yes, there is an element of Parkinson's in there that is causing this tremor, but there are other affecting issues as well. And I think that's where we have to be very careful with words like syndromes, because as you quite rightly say, Diana, it's a thing that I have a thing now. I've got it. I can keep it. It's a label. Stick it on my chest. You know, I have this thing. And then it kind of leads us off down a thing of hopelessness because we feel like we can't do anything to work with it. Can we heal it completely? Possibly not, but can we work with it well and manage it well? Yes, we can do that. So anyway, I'm waffling on. I'm going to go, but yes, we will keep doing things each week to put ourselves back from whatever you guys have been doing throughout the week.
Thank you so much, Kaz. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.